Alright, so hello one and all, welcome back to another Mushoku Tensei episode review, where I go over the anime, manga, and light novel to talk about everything and anything that the anime skipped, because usually there's a lot. And so this one will be kind of a shorter episode today, not too many differences, but let's just get into this with episode 13, Missed Connections. So this episode doesn't start off with us dealing with Dead End, but rather we're focusing on Roxy, Elinalise, and Talon. And it starts off with Elinalise saying how much the Adventurers Guild reeks of men's sweat and how, down bad she is for it. She's, shaking Talon, going oh my god, don't you agree? Oh my god, it smells so good, right? She then kind of just walks away, starts hitting on guys, while a C-rank party approaches Roxy, asks if she'd like to join them. Rejecting their offer, Roxy says that she's already in a party and she's an A-rank adventurer, so she can join them even if she wanted to. The party is quite shocked, but they kind of just move on and walk away. And then Elinalise, however, says that Roxy should have some fun with them, but Roxy says that she's not here for romance. But then, however, she does start to look at Elinalise's body, compares it to her own. And although it's not, much more developed, it's certainly more mature looking. And it's also stated that Roxy, I guess, she has memories here, so I guess she's traveled the demon continent quite a bit in her past. And later on, Roxy asks what Paul was like back when they were in a party together, and both Elinalise and Talon almost instantly say that he's scum. But then during the opening credits of the episode, we see Roxy trying to find information, and it seems like Talon is doing the same, all while Elinalise goes into a sketchy alley with a bunch of guys and seduces them. She's just so down bad, and I can't handle it. But later that night, they discuss Dead End, whom Elinalise wants to have sex with, because of course she does. But they're described as Guard Dog Rudeus, who loves children, Mad Dog Eris, who is a red-headed woman with a quick temper, and Kennel Master Rudeus, who is a tiny mage that is always up to no good. And they also state that the name Dead End, like the party, has only now popped up after the teleportation incident. And I don't want to badmouth our goddess here, but her former student was a child mage who is always up to no good, who eventually tutored a girl named Eris who had red hair and was a menace, and both were taken away during the teleportation incident. I feel like you kind of just put two and two together at that point. Whatever. But they then move on from talking about Dead End because they have to remember what they're looking for. They're looking for Zenith, Lilia, Aisha, and Rudeus. Both Elinalise and Talon are sure that Zenith is fine on her own since she was an S-rank adventurer. And Roxy says that Rudy stands out, and so if he's alive, he should be found quickly. And so if she only used her brain just a little bit, she might be able to realize something, but it doesn't matter. The point is, they realize that they should be focusing on finding Lilia and Aisha. But the next day, Roxy recalls the events of her time in Buena Village 6 years ago and wonders what Rudeus is up to, but as she does, she comes across Eris and Rudeus training. This means that this was probably around the time that Rudeus was stuck in his room trying to train his demon eye. And so based on the descriptions of the Eris and Rudeus, they must be Dead End. And upon making eye contact with Rudeus, just instinctually, she knows he is a real Suberd. And then, just terrified, she runs away and just passes by Rudeus, because of course she does. Then she runs back into her inn to find Elinalise getting railed, everywhere. And then Roxy freaks out again and blasts the men with a bunch of spells called Icicle Break. And in Elinalise's defense, she was in the back alley getting information when she was invited to do it, and so she just couldn't refuse. And Roxy's just appalled because there were 5 of them. God, Elinalise. Horny levels detected. Why the fuck you so horny, bro? But Elinalise says that despite her being a strong, beautiful adventurer, she was helpless in those hoodlums' hands. And Elinalise invites Roxy next time so that she can have her first. But Roxy says that is just out of the question. She'd one day like a tall young man who's manly but still makes childish expressions to save her by chance in the depths of a labyrinth. As they team up and work together, love will blossom between them as they escape the labyrinth. And upon hearing that, Elinalise calls Roxy childish as they make their way to the next town. We finally cut back to Dead End as they make their deal with Gallus Cleaner. They would smuggle Ruger across to Xanport, but in return they'd have to liberate certain smuggled goods once they reach there. Rudeus imagines what would happen when they get on the boat, right? They enjoy the waters until they get attacked by some monster as it sinks, and then from there they get washed up on a deserted island where they try and survive, but eventually he and Eris would fall in love. However, reality was cruel, as it often is. And it shows that Eris is just like vomiting her brains out due to seasickness. And so she lies down, head between Rudeus' thighs as he heals her. And she asks, "Am I going to die?" And to make Eris a little bit more comfortable, she's partially undressed, which makes Rudeus have to go to the bathroom. And this is kind of an oddly like sexually charged episode. And so they finally make it to Millis. Hooray! God is finally among us. And so lying on the ground, Eris is like, I am never going on another boat again. But Rudeus does remind her that they still have to cross the west port to go to the east port. So it's not over. But then she's like, oh, you'll heal me like you did just now, right? On the next boat, you're going to heal me again, right? And he's like, I mean, yep, sure, I guess. But I mean, I might have to cop a feel. And then she tells him not to tease her, but she's like, fine, I mean, I'll let you touch me a little bit, I guess. And then after their conversation, Rudeus goes to fetch Ruger because he was like, he was being smuggled on a different part of the boat somewhere else. And so he heads to a house located somewhere in a forest and is led down to the basement, which turns out to be a giant cellar. Walking through it, he notices a large white dog that's lying down on a magic circle. And he passes by a beast folk girl who's getting tortured, and then he finally comes across Ruger, who sits in a cell with a bag over his head. Ruger says that there are 5 beast children here and that there were 6, but they killed one of them for being too noisy. Ruger says that he wants to save them and kill all of the people down here in the basement. Rudeus himself doesn't want to kill anybody, but Ruger's like, hey, don't worry, I'll do it. And so breaking out of the cuffs, he pulls the bag off of his head to reveal that he has some green hair growing back. So I guess, the boat ride was a few days, I guess. Ruger starts with the guard that led Rudeus down into the cellar and pierces him through the neck with his spear. And as Ruger goes on a killing spree, Rudeus finds the 5 beast children and heals them. Ruger then shows up though and kneels down in front of the one that was killed and apologizes. Speaking the beast god tongue, Rudeus tells the children that he's going to get them out of here and lead them to the nearest city. And so as Rudeus leads them, one of the children gives like a legit meow as she said that there was someone that they forgot. And it was the dog, of course. And so Rudeus, after they've already gone out, he goes all the way back down into the cellar and goes back for the dog, which is protected by a magic circle that acts as a wall. It's a barrier magic circle. And so Rudeus destroys the magic stone that powers the circle, and the dog jumps on Rudeus and he starts petting it. However, 2 beastfolk men show up as one yells, completely paralyzing Rudeus's body with some kind of magic, which is voice magic. Those guys think that Rudeus is one of the smugglers and says that he was fondling the sacred beast with a lewd grin on his face. And the older man says that Tona, one of the beast children, is headed towards the city because he can smell her scent going in that direction. The 2 men split up, with the younger man taking the Rudeus and the sacred beast back to their village, and the older man, his father, to search for the children. And so that is the episode. There's not a whole lot going on in this episode. I mean, there is, but there isn't. It's a lot of just straightforward stuff. And so the manga itself doesn't exactly add too much, but there's still some minor differences, so I'm going to quickly go over that. And so the manga starts us off with a discussion between Rudeus, Ruger, and Gallus. He explains that in exchange for getting Ruger to Xanport, he has a certain item that's held somewhere that someone is going to pick up, as well as certain goods that are on board that will soon become slaves. He wants Rudeus to free those goods and deliver them back home before it happens. Ruger makes it on board to another ship as an item, as Rudeus and Eris board the ship regularly. On board, Eris clings to Rudeus as she begs him to heal her of her seasickness, and this is where they have a little one-on-one discussion where Rudeus apologizes for beating her using the demon eye. Eris goes I knew that I would lose, but I won't lose next time. and then 2 weeks later they arrived at Zanport. That is a slow boat. But then a little bit later, Rudeus finds Rudeus in his cell, and after hearing that there are 7 beast children being held down here, Rudeus breaks free from his cuffs as Rudeus tosses Rudeus' spear from behind him as he dashes forward and pierces one of the smugglers in the neck, announcing that he's going to kill each and every one of them. They find the beast children as Rudeus finally understands why Soros loved them so much, and before they escape they say that there's a dog that needs saving, and so Rudeus and Rudeus split up, with Rudeus going to escort the children as Rudeus finds the dog. And then Rudeus then gets found by the 2 beast folk men and is taken as a prisoner. So that's kind of it for the manga. There's not too much real differences, I just wanted to go over it. And so let's move on to the light novel. So the light novel, just like the manga, throws us back to when Rudeus and Rudeus run into Gallus, only this time he wasn't found by Rudeus, but rather Gallus was stalking them, waiting for an opportunity to talk. He says that among the stolen goods, the beast children, there was one that was a little bit too dangerous for him and his buddies to handle. So in hindsight, we can probably assume that he's talking about the dog, the sacred beast. Gallus wants Rudeus to get the children out of there and return them to the beast village. Before continuing on with the story, however, we do get a Roxy POV for a bit. After they arrive at Windport, Roxy recalls the last time that she'd been here, which was about 15 years ago. Once she left the demon continent for the first time and had a taste of Millis' sweets, she vowed that she would never eat the food from the demon continent ever again, or return ever again. But here she was. And as Elinalise calls out to Roxy, this is where Roxy compares her body to Elinalise's. And Elinalise was an elf, tall with a thin waist and a big ass. And although they had a similar bust size, her body was well balanced, unlike Roxy's childish frame. But just as stunning as her looks, Elinalise was quite a skilled fighter and wielded a shield and an estoc, which is a sword. It's almost like a crossbreed between a long sword and a rapier. But both her sword and shield, however, were magical items. Her estoc was quite sturdy compared to other swords and created a wind vacuum that could destroy trees from meters away with just a single swing. And her shield, on the other hand, absorbs almost any attack it receives and lowers the impact of it. And then there's Elinalise herself, who claims to have a curse that requires her to have sex. A lot of it. However, she doesn't seem at all displeased by it, so yeah. But now there's Talhand, which is currently recovering from seasickness. And Talhand is known as Talhand, the harsh, large mountain summit. And he's a dwarf magician who wears bulky and heavy armor. And at first, Roxy kind of questioned this. Why would a magician be wearing such heavy armor? You want to kind of be dexterous. But I guess Talhand just doesn't need to. And the reason why is just because he himself is not nimble or agile in any way. And so if he were to ever get attacked by a monster face to face, light armor isn't really going to save him and allow him to run away. Heavy armor probably will though. And with this, he'd even be able to fight on the front lines against other people. And it's stated that Elinalise and Talhand are known to fight quite often and were both once in Fangs of the Black Wolf, a popular S-rank party back in the day before disbanding. They were known for being an odd mismatch of people with all unique traits. And for a quick refresher, the members were the Warrior, Elinalise, Swordsman Paul, Swordswoman Ghislaine, Magician Talhand, Priest Zenith, and Thief, which we don't know who it is yet, technically. And Roxy was surprised that Elinalise and Talhand were part of the popular party Fangs of the Black Wolf. But Elinalise and Talhand were just as surprised at her reaction, since Roxy Magurdia, the famous Water King magician, who eventually became one of Sharon's kingdom's court magicians, is now working with them. So it's like 2 celebrities kind of meeting each other and going oh my god, I've always wanted to meet you. And as she arrives at the Adventurers Guild, she recalls the song of a troubadour that sang about her, which I just realized the troubadour is in the light novel. Because I was talking about this last time, we had a huge troubadour part. There have been, so if you guys aren't keeping up with the series, which is understandable, in both my episode 8 and 10 reviews during the manga, there's a Roxy side story and a Sylphie side story that have a troubadour sing a song about them. And it seems like that this troubadour has been alive for 100 years or something. I don't know. She's such a mysterious character that shows up so often. And you can't even see all of her face. You only get to see the bottom half, and she's just so mysterious. But I don't believe that she's in the anime, and I didn't think that she was in the light novel, but I guess she is. So that's interesting. Who is the troubadour? I get that the Troubadour is probably just an excuse to be able to tell these random stories, but still, I gotta know. Anyway, the Troubadour sings about Roxy and gets a lot of facts wrong, and she says that Roxy had become an A-rank adventurer in just a year, which was far from the truth. Roxy had actually taken 3 years to rise up to B rank and then spent 2 years hopping from party to party to become A rank. Anyway, moving on from the Troubadour, 3 young men ask Roxy to join their party. And as they do, she gets flashbacks to this party that she met who called themselves the Rikarisu Gang. One was sarcastic but was good for looking out for people. The other cursed people but was very determined. And the third was very clever who held the group together. However, they died during the party. And she thinks, oh, Nokopara and Blaze, I hope they're doing well. So I guess Nokopara is the sarcastic but like good-natured person, and then Blaze is likely the one who cursed people but was determined. And yeah, it also, I guess Roxy's friends with Nokopara and Blaze, so that's oof. And also she'll have to figure out that Blaze did die as well, so it's only Nokopara left. Kinda sad, but at the same time, man, I feel like Nokopara should have been the one to go. And so later on at the inn, she finds out about Dead End and goes to describe how her mother used to scare her about him when she was a kid. And so some people actually see this as a continuity error. Like, why would Roxy's mother, Rokari, be, like, scared of Rudeus and tell her daughter that, like, he's a scary, evil monster, when we literally just saw a couple episodes ago that, like, they're all good, they're all pals, kind of, right? Rudeus, a Superd, is friends with all the Meaghards in the village. But, remember, it's been 10 years or 5 years, depending on the canon. I think it's 10 years in the anime, 5 years in the light novel or manga, where that is when the Meaghards met Rudeus and found out that he's not a horrible guy. And it's been over 15 years when Roxy left the Demon Continent. And that also means that it was likely even longer before that when she left her village itself. So the point is, the Meaghards didn't know of how good Rudeus was until after Roxy left. So that explains why Roxy was still fed these stories as a kid, and why Rokari and the other Meaghards are fine with Rudeus now. But anyway, Roxy explains her plan to make their way swiftly through the villages and cities, posting missing persons search requests. And we find out a little bit about how the Asura Kingdom is dealing with this. Basically, if someone goes searching for one of the missing peoples, the Asura Kingdom will compensate them if their group submitted requests at each guild. However, that's only if the guild has a missing person request posted. If they don't, then the Asura Kingdom doesn't have to pay them, and so they won't. And so despite such a disaster, they really weren't taking much action in this situation. We then cut to Roxy spying on Rudeus and Eris sparring, and it's revealed, although we kind of already knew this, that this is the fight where Eris got the upper hand on Rudeus and knocked his spear out of his hand. But this was obviously simply due to him being distracted by Roxy. He didn't want Eris to win a fight just yet, because ego can lead to disaster. I mean, look at Vegeta. His new ultra ego doesn't really do anything for him. Rudeus then sighed as he picked back up his spear. As Roxy runs away, she makes her way back to the inn where she overhears Elinalise doing her thing. And she decided to wait until Elinalise was done doing her business so then she could come out and Roxy would drag her by the ear to force her to investigate with her. But then Elinalise just never came out. 3 hours pass and she's still going at it. And then, barging through the door, Roxy catches Elinalise with 5 men and uses the spell Icicle Blast and recites its incantation. O spirits of the magnificent waters, I beseech the Prince of Thunder, with your majestic blade of ice, slay my enemy, Icicle Blast. And, yeah. God, Elinalise can just keep going. But on the 3rd day, Roxy, Elinalise, and Talhan set out for the next town. Elinalise says that Roxy would one day understand the thrill of her, a strong adventurer, being degraded and used as nothing but a sex toy. And Roxy says, no, I really don't think I will. In fact, it wasn't even until she overheard Paul and Zenith go at it all the time that she'd even considered finding a partner. Her ideal romance goes like this, and I'm just gonna quote it. She would somehow bump into someone who is tall, manly, and fashionably dressed. A young human man with a youthful appearance, in the depths of a labyrinth, and he would save her. Then the two of them would combine their strengths and make their escape, and in doing so their love would bud and blossom. The youth would discover one of his friends had died, and Roxy would comfort him. That would be their first night together. However, her fantasies were shattered when she actually started exploring labyrinths for the first time. The only young and youthful person in a labyrinth was Roxy herself. And by the 5th floor, there were no more solo adventurers, and by the 10th, things were too tough that she needed to form a party. However, she was always laughed off for being too childish and thus kept going down further alone despite the risks. And so now we cut back to Dead End, and Gallus says that they needed to wait 15, I don't know how to do that with 2 hands. They needed to wait 15 days until they were able to set sail. And the mission went like this. Once they arrived at Milos, Rudeus would then have to find a house where the smuggled goods were temporarily stored. They would free those who were taken and bring them back home. It was a little vague and seemingly a little bit dangerous, and so Rudeus decided that it would be a Rudeus and Ruijerd solo mission, no Eris. And so on the day of the operation, they handed Ruijerd over to the smugglers, who treated him like a slave. They placed him on a little raft with other adults who were also being smuggled. Using some kind of water spell, the raft made its way to the merchant ship as a "Goodbye, my lover" played in Rudeus's head. Goodbye, Ruijerd. I'll always love you. And then Rudeus and Eris were responsible for selling their lizard mounts because they don't really need it anymore, because remember, lizard mounts are good for like rocky terrain, and now Milos is kind of nice and smooth, so now they'll need horses continuing forward. However, the lizard itself had actually grown quite attached to Eris, and so she gave a hug around its neck and patted its head. And after seeing this between Eris and the lizard, albeit it's a little bit late, Rudeus thought that he'd name it. He called it Guella Ha, which is a reference to a character from Romancing Saga. That's who it is. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I've never heard of that game, but it looks interesting. And after exchanging the currency and selling Guella Ha, "Goodbye, my lover" started to play in his head again, but then he thought about it for a second. The money for Guella Ha kind of felt a little dirty, so he decided to revoke the name and just call the lizard Lizard. So goodbye, unnamed lizard. I'll always love you. Eris then started to tear up before they made their way to the ship and was amazed at its size, immediately forgetting about the lizard. And so a few days later, they set off, and I'm going to skip over a lot of what's said during the travel. It's a lot of Rudeus and his thoughts. If you get what I'm talking about, YouTube won't allow me to say it, so we're gonna skip past that. However, there were a couple interesting things that did happen on the ship though. Rudeus saw an S-rank party called Aqua Road that worked with the Shipwrights Guild and dealt with any attacking monsters that came near the ship. At first, Rudeus was disappointed in their strength, but realized that they worked really well as a team. Meanwhile, Dead End was the opposite. They were strong on their own, but weren't really good as a team. And so that's something that they'll definitely have to work on in the future. But once they reach Milos, the two of them got off the boat as Eris asks when they're going on the next boat. And Rudeus will heal her again, right? And then he says, oh yeah, no, of course I'll heal you. But I might have to touch you a little bit. And however, the truth is, if he were to touch her, he probably wouldn't be able to hold himself back, and then he'd go all the way. Because she's in such a weakened state, it's not like she can fight back or anything, and this is just awful, Rudeus. However, he doesn't want to break the promise to wait until his 15th birthday. If they did it any sooner, it wouldn't be a good time, and they'd both regret it. At least Rudeus has does he have good morals? He has some kind of morals there, but at least he's not touching her. At least he convinced himself to not. Oh my god. As they made their way through Zandport, they noticed that much like the Demon Continent, there were plenty of different raced people here, only this time a lot of them looked very human-like. There were beast folk, elves, dwarves, and halflings. And after some trouble at finding an inn, they eventually found a pretty shabby one on the outskirts of town. The reason why so many inns were booked is because the rainy season is coming up in the Great Forest. And this causes certain monsters to appear, and said monsters give a good cash reward, and so many adventurers come down at this time of the year to hunt. And so being in a sketchy part of the town, Rudeus made Eris stay so she could keep an eye on their things, just to make sure that nothing got stolen, like her underwear, which she just washed. However, Eris retorts and says that the only one who's willing to steal underwear is you, Rudeus. But then Rudeus is like, no, I've never once tried to steal your underwear. After they were washed. But after some convincing, Rudeus alone made his way to where Ruijerd was, and upon arriving, Rudeus is met with 4 warehouses and goes up to the one labeled Warehouse 3, where Ruijerd is being kept. And after giving a man a secret password, he is led downstairs to a cave, and after walking through the cave for nearly an hour, he is led back to the surface and is greeted with a dense forest. They're now somewhere outside of the city. After talking about this guy about not telling anyone about this area, Rudeus thinks like, why aren't they like making me sign a blood contract or something? But then remember that this race doesn't exactly have like fingerprints or like any sort of way to identify people like that. So I don't know, I just found that point interesting. And so now going into another basement, Rudeus finds Rudeus and he informs him about the 7 beast children that are kept down here. He goes on the rampage while Rudeus goes to save the kids. There were 3 boys and 4 girls, all beaten and with one of them barely breathing. Among them were a silver-haired dog girl and a silver-haired cat girl, both quite developed. And the cat girl seemed to be the strongest of them all and was the one that was most beaten, since she didn't have any tears down her eyes like the others. He heals them as he gets the boys to keep watch on the outside as he uncuffed the girls. They were all naked, and so getting them clothed would be his top priority. And so after Rudeus came back without a drop of blood on him somehow, Rudeus got him to find them clothing for the children while he goes out and burns the bodies. Which, there's apparently a lot of them, but after using Fireball, he almost burns down the entire building but extinguishes it with water. And so then returning to Rudeus, he sees that they've all been covered with torn curtains, and Rudeus is like, oh shit, damn, I wouldn't have thought of that. I was thinking of taking the clothes off these dead guys, but then I kind of burned them. But the children then start arguing with Rudeus, telling them that he needs to save the dog. And before continuing, Rudeus made them thank Rudeus for saving them before any further requests. Rudeus then splits up with Rudeus and heads back to the cellar. And so now seeing the dog a little bit closer, he could tell that he was a puppy, but was over 2 meters tall and was not white, but had silver fur. It also looked like a Shiba Inu. And so it's kind of funny how the different adaptations portray, Leo is the dog's name, I'm just going to say. It's funny how different the adaptations make Leo look out to be. In the anime, he has white fur. In the light novel, he has silver fur. And in the manga, for a little bit anyway, they showed him with like green fur. Well, actually, I don't know if they like ever show a colored panel of Leo as green, but I'm pretty sure he's described as a green dog later on, which is kind of weird. But anyway, he tried to get close to the dog, but something stopped him. It wasn't like an electric shock, but it almost felt like his pain receptors were just going off as he got too close. It was a barrier, which is a type of healing magic, which is weird, but it's classified under that. Magic Circle glowed a faint blue, which meant that there was mana circulating in it, and therefore there is a source, aka a magic crystal. Not exactly knowing the consequences of destroying a magic circle when it's activated, he searched around for the source, and upstairs, directly above the cell, was a lantern that held a magic crystal inside of it, and it sat on top of a smaller magic circle. And so he removed the lamp from the smaller magic circle, and the light to that went off. And then he went downstairs and noticed that the larger magic circle that covered up Leo was also gone. And so after removing the chains and collar from Leo, he started to lick Rudeus, and that's when Guys, pretty sure that's how you pronounce his name, G-Y-E-S, I don't know, Guys? Yes? I'm going to call him Guys. And so Guys and his father came in. Guys just thought that Rudeus was one of the smugglers, but his father was open to other ideas. Perhaps he was the one that saved the children. Regardless of that, though, they said that Rudeus did feel arousal when he pet the dog, and so regardless, he needed to be punished. And above ground, the two split up, and Guys would take Rudeus back home, and his father would search for the children using Tona's scent. The father also noted that he smelt this demon's scent, but just like with Rudeus, he thinks that he might be saving the children rather than being one of the smugglers. And from there, they split up. And this is where we end the light novel today. So not a whole lot today. Again, just we get some extra information, more lore and stuff as usual. But this was a nice kind of calmer, quicker episode. And so I guess if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more Mushoku Tensei content. I swear one day I will do other things other than episode reviews, but I'm just getting these out of the way. And so I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.